Hey guys, I'm Miriam Cutelis and I'm an art teacher in elementary, and I've been teaching for 21 years. And I have 10 tips for you for how to maintain a high level of engagement for your students in the art room. So let's get started. Okay, rule number one, and it's probably the most important, and if you just follow that one, I think you'll be okay. But rule number one is that the learning they're doing should be meaningful to them personally. And getting to that personal part takes a little bit of digging, takes a little bit of getting them to just show you what their interests are, maybe having a little bit of open-ended projects where they're able to then share what their interests are. And yes, a lot of the interests might seem petty and commercial to you, but to them, it's very important. So you have to meet them there. And then, as I said, engagement will be a lot higher once the art that they're making is about them and they're able to bring in the things that they're excited about into their art. Number two is heighten up the expectations. I was an English language learner in New York City public schools and in fourth grade. And although I didn't speak English, I knew when the teachers just pretty much let me off the hook. And when kids feel that you have a lowered expectation for them, they pretty much know that you've given up on them. And that is equivalent to not caring. So for me, I have pretty high expectations, and I let them know not only that I have a high expectation, but I also say, I believe in you. I believe you can do this. Actually, you know what? Erase the word believe out of there. You're doing this. You are absolutely going to do this. You're fine. I know you can do this. And the certainty of that coming from a grown-up to a child is very powerful. And it's also very encouraging that that gap is able to be bridged. Number three, visuals. I am a visual learner, as all art people are, but not just art people, not just like visual learners. Everybody learns from visuals. So like seriously, just everything. Just have examples for everything. If you're going to introduce a new vocab word, have an actual picture with the word. And like you just, especially now, I think where kids are seeing memes and understand memes, and there's so much information that's being communicated with just a picture. So think of ways that you can build that into your curriculum, into your slideshows, into your lessons, where you have images of what these concepts are and how would you depict those concepts using images. Or art making. So my kids both don't like art very much. And it breaks my heart because I'm an art teacher. The number one complaint they both had when they started hating art was that their teacher just talked too much. And what are you doing just talking? Like, this is the opportunity you have where, yes, talking is okay, but like your hands should be moving. Even while you're talking, you could be demonstrating so that kids are watching you making things. And I also, if it's one of those lessons, let's say I'm online doing a lesson, if it's one of those lessons where you are just demonstrating, tell them it's okay to doodle. Tell them it's okay to just draw or make a visual list in their sketchbooks. Constantly have their hands moving, because the more of your body that you're engaging, the more that the information will be retained, right? And also the higher the engagement, obviously. Number five, modeling. Okay, so modeling what? Modeling making mistakes, for one. A lot of kids, I realize, think I'm like this art expert. I'm not an art expert. I hate drawing. I'm not a good drawer. And actually, I noticed that has helped my art teaching, not knowing how to draw, because they feel so at home with me. Like, they're not intimidated. And I don't know if you've noticed, but with kids, like whoever knows how to draw something realistically is like art god. and having an art teacher who they already think is an art god, like not draw very well is like very welcoming to them. It's very comfortable. And they can just walk right in and feel at home because they're not feeling like the stress of like the continuum of perfection versus like doodling, like they really think that like good art is someone who can draw realistically, which is really sad because I fight that every way I can, because that ultimately is not what good art is. So another thing I model, aside from being imperfect, and I don't actually model it, I am imperfect, and I actually model stick-to-itiveness. So I model sticking through something, not only in my life, because I feel like I model that in my life anyway. Like I am a middle-aged, overweight woman who's run several marathons, and I feel like that has been a tough journey, but I've modeled that in my own life. But in the art room, the way that I model stick-to-itiveness is if I get frustrated or I make a mistake, I work on the spot to fix my mistake in an art way, or figure out a way to emotionally handle this frustration, because we all been there. If we're artists, we all been there. We're making something, we're so excited, and then boom, like there's frustration. We don't know, there's like 5 different ways to go, and we don't really know which direction to go. And modeling that out loud in front of them is golden. Like, we don't have all the answers. Hello, that's golden. Number 6. Okay, so number 6 is, how do you answer that question of, I need to know if you like it? The kids have been trained to check with the grown-up to see what the grown-up thinks. Really rely on the worth of their work based on the teacher's ideas. So they've been using teachers their whole lives as like sort of a mirror. And so when they ask me that question, what do I think? Obviously I will be supportive of their work and positive, but I will always add in there, what do you think? You do know that that's more important than what I think, right? And put it back on them. And I think the more you do that, and I do see the kids from the time they're in kindergarten until they're in 4th grade. So I do have that opportunity to really hone in that idea from the very beginning. And so when they ask you, teacher, what do you think? Always disengage that, always unplug that need. Obviously give them feedback and constructive feedback, but I also will question it. I'll question that need by saying, you do know that it's while it's important for me to give you feedback, and it's more important what you think about it, and like use whatever feedback they have about their own work as sort of a starting point for their next work. So it's so important to always just flip it back, and don't allow yourself to be used as a mirror, because every other subject matter, that is sort of what's happening, and that's okay, because that's the structure that within which they exist. But for art, for the purposes of art, if we want them to be thinkers, and we want them to make choices that are personally meaningful, it's really important that we flip the mirror back and face it to them. Okay, number 7. Number 7 is, look how beautifully different. Focus on differences. I felt like I could have retired last week when one of my kindergartners, when we were sharing online, and we're teaching online still, when we were sharing online what they had done, and they were all very different. And one of the kids basically took the words out of my mouth and said, we are all so different, and in a very celebratory way. And I felt like, okay, I can retire now. I'm done. This is it. But that's where you want to drive. That's where you want to drive them. You want them to celebrate each other's differences. You want them to also honor theirs. And how relieving and how calming that must be for a child to know that their personal their personal sort of DNA, their personal art DNA is going to be valued just as much as the child next to them, even though their work is completely different. So that is such a valuable lesson for humanity, not just in the classroom, but for being a human, just, yes, I honor you for being different, but I also honor my inner voice, and it's okay that we're different. I mean, that's just so much fun. Okay, number 8, starts with a story. I have a child who we were doing a project, a collage, and I always start with like a blank copy paper, and it's white. And one of the kids raised their hand and said, "Is it okay if I use a different color background?" And of course, I mean, the answer is of course, but what concerned me about the question was the need for that question to even be asked. And what have I done? What have I not done to emphasize to them that that those are choices that they could have made from the very beginning? So that told me that, okay, I needed to stop for a minute and let them know. And I actually did speak to this child, and I said, I should have let you answer that question. What do you think? What do you think Ms. Cutelis will tell you? And I think, because again, since the very beginning, since kindergarten, I have been very open about the fact that I'm using this yellow paper, but you can use whatever color you want, because we are different people, we have different needs, we have different likes, and so on. Again, I think it's important to, when those kinds of questions come up, to really stop and address it, because I think it's important for every kid in the class to hear that there are certain things that are solely your decision. And I know in art, at least in the old ways that, when art was just terribly boring, when it was more like follow step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they all need to look the same in the end. When art was like that, yes, I understand. Sadly, a lot of education is that way. It's like follow the steps and follow directions, which is not a very high level of thinking. Number 9, share your art ideas. I'm an art teacher, but I'm also an artist, and I do all kinds of things. I do fiber artwork. I do earrings. I explore printmaking. I paint watercolors. I use mixed media. So the kids actually really encourage my art making. And so I think it's important, being an artist, to share the ideas that are floating around in my head with them every once in a while, and for them to see that the art that they put on their paper begins with an idea that is within themselves. Whenever we do artwork that's inspired by an artist, I'm very careful that we're not just copying the artist. I'm very careful to explain the ideas behind the work, and then you are free to choose from the varied ideas behind this artwork, to choose any part of the ideas that you might want to connect with. But it might not always be like where, let's say, it might not always be where you're connecting in such a way that your work is even going to look like the artist. If that's happening, then it's too tight. It's way too tight, and the kids are not really able to, again, it's not about themselves, it's just about copy. Okay, number 10, and this one's a big one. I'm going to push hard here.